historical fashion friends, and today I'm going to be doing a really quick video on how I made this sweatshirt using rectangular construction for my husband for Valentine's Day. He really wanted something that reminded him of like Clint Eastwood, and he saw this fabric on one of the de-stash sites I was looking at, and he really liked it. He was like, I want that. And then so I made it for him as his Valentine's Day present. And yes, I am wearing a monkey onesie. It's 11 p.m. so I am in a monkey onesie mood. Just feeling cozy. Also, it is cold suddenly again in LA. It was like 89 the other day and I went on a hike, and then it was like, just kidding, cold again. So I'm going to show you all quickly how I made this. It's super simple. If you've watched my videos on rectangular construction from the early Middle Ages, like tunics and shifts, it's basically the same thing, just shorter and with a hood. So let's get to it. Here's the pattern that I made for the sweatshirt. It's really easy to follow. As long as you know the measurements from your shoulder to your shoulder, you can make the two sets of body pieces, and as long as you know your waist measurement, you can make sure that it fits there as well. Then you'll just need to know how long your arm is, and you're good to go. Not shown in this patterning is the twill tape, which I used to secure the edges of my hood and neck opening. You could also just use a spare piece of fabric if you wanted, but I was glad to use the twill tape because it already had one finished edge. First, I am going to take the pocket and put this on the edge to bind the edge here. First, I'm going to sew the twill tape onto the right side and then flip it over and sew it to the other side. So I sewed it like this, and then to bind it, I am just turning this over, and I'm going to just sew it down like I did on this side. Now I am going to zigzag the shoulder seams together. Okay, and now I have pinned my pocket to the front of my garment. I am going to do 2 rows of straight stitches to keep this seam allowance in place, and then I'm going to have to tack down the corners by hand just because it's too bulky to fit under my machine. Okay, so I have sewn on the pocket, and I'm going to finish tacking down these edges by hand, but first I am going to flip this inside out and sew the side body pieces. By the way, this is secondhand and it smells, so I'm gonna have to wash it before I give it to my husband. Although it might add to the Wild West Clint Eastwood feel he's going for. So it's pinned, and I have just left enough room for the sleeve to go in. Okay, now I'm going to sew the hood together at the back and on the top, and I'm using the already closed up blanket edge as the front, so I don't have to do any sort of finishing there except maybe trim off these little knob things. Okay, so I have sewn the hood together, and then I just stitched down the seam allowance to prevent fraying, and now I am going to attach the hood to the neckline. I have cut a notch, and I'm going to attach a toggle after I face the opening, but I've never put in a hood before, so this is going to be interesting. Okay, so I have attached my hood with pins, and it goes from the front opening all the way around to the other side, and I'm just going to leave off a little bit for my tape binding here, and it'll be almost done. Now I have just added these two so close to the edge and turn it over to make a facing both here and here. And then I am going to sew the sleeves, add them in, and we will be done. So where the shoulder seam meets the hood, I just have a little hole that I'm going to hand sew, and then I'm going to finish putting on this binding and move on to the sleeves. So I'm just finishing stitching all of this down by hand, and I'm gonna have to do the same on the sleeves because I had to do a little adjusting. But I am so close to being done. I'm really excited. Okay, so here's the finished sweatshirt. Here you can see the edge binding and the toggle, which I attached, and this little loop just goes in there, and it's basically just stuck through the weaving of the sweatshirt fabric and then sewn into the binding for a little extra security. Here's our hood. All of the seams are finished by doing another line of stitches down for the seam allowance to prevent the fraying of the fabric. And then, so I realized after I had put down all the seam allowances that I had sewn one sleeve incorrectly and one sleeve in incorrectly, which meant that I actually wasn't really able to pull apart the seam because of the way this fabric is. It was really hard to pull it apart. So I ended up having to seam rip inside of this seam and then hand sew it back down with the seam allowance already tacked in place. So that was a little time consuming. And luckily for me though, the edges of the sleeves and the hood and the bottom of the garment were all already woven. So I didn't have to finish any of those. We've got a nice big pocket here, and it looks not as nice as it does on my husband on this mannequin because it's made for him and not this mannequin. So it looks much more filled out on his masculine shoulders. So this was an easy project to do except for messing up the sleeve, which I always seem to do, but it was very simple in construction, and there are, of course, some gores in the armpit, which are just sewn in the way you would do it on a early medieval smock or tunic. So if you want to make yourself one of these, just grab yourself a thrifted blanket, and it is very simple. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time for some more historical content.